Well, hello and good morning. It's morning time where we are. But today I want to dive into this topic. I'm so excited to talk about it. We are going to spend some time, Jeremiah and I, talking about when is the right time to hire a financial advisor, but more importantly, how do you know if you're ready to hire a financial advisor? Like, what is going on in your life where you might need to reach out and need the help of a financial advisor? So we're going to talk through some specific scenarios. We get a chance to talk to a lot of people, a lot of which have, completely different financial scenarios, right? It is never a one size fits one. And in some cases, it is the right answer to hire a financial advisor, but not all cases.
Yeah.
Jeremiah, do you
This
want
is
to go ahead
great.
and kick us off?
Now, this is going to be a great conversation. Running joke in our family that I'm often the most serious conversation at a party. Not because I'm trying to be serious, but just because someone taps me on the shoulder and says, "Hey, you're a financial advisor, and oh, you're an attorney too. I had a quick question," and we dive
It's
into
never
something.
quick, is it?
It's never quick, and it's always like, so I'm thinking about this, and what's interesting in those moments is sometimes it's just talking, right? It's just, hey, I had a question about how this works and why does that work. I'm always happy to share, and there's other moments where I look at someone and say, you need an advisor. You need someone not just as a cocktail party discussion. You need someone to sit with you in the details in your life. And one of my favorites is when we work with a new client who we're just getting to know them, and they say, okay, well, here's what I have. And they open up their spreadsheet. It's their master list of taxes and retirements and projections and what ifs. And man, I love spreadsheets. I love this stuff. And so I sit down with people when they have these, and you can tell they've put a lot of time, they put a lot of research, the weight of either their retirement or their real estate investment or their portfolio they're trying to build. The weight of that choice is in that spreadsheet. You can feel it. But then they'll talk about, but I'm not sure what to do with taxes, or it's real estate. And we'll say, hey, did you put in like depreciation recapture? And they're like, and that's the reason why they need a thought partner, is to say, what am I missing? What do I need to do? What else do I need to think about? And how am I really going to make this move forward? So today we're talking about what are the signs when we're in that moment that you said, hey, rather than just a cocktail party discussion, you need someone on your team. You need a who in your life. You need some sort of advisor that's going to come alongside you. Do we have a list of things?
I think, yeah. And really, one of the first signs is how complex has your financial situation become? When you're just starting out and you're getting your first paycheck and you're just learning what it means to pay taxes and how to file your taxes, right? You're probably not at a point where you're ready to hire a financial advisor. But when complexity starts to come into place, maybe you own one property or more, maybe you're dealing with some debt, maybe you want to have some long-term savings and we're wondering, how do we invest it? We have children, we're thinking about the expense of college and how that is going up year to year. How do we plan for retirement? Some people can make it through most of their sort of asset accumulation phase of life, which is just what financial planners call like that time when you're at your highest income earning stage of your life, right? You're building your career. A lot of people make it through that season of life without a financial advisor and then come to the point where they're planning for retirement and they're like, whoa, we've got multiple income streams. We've got multiple tax situations. And like Jeremiah was saying, there's so much information and people come to us. They've built out their master spreadsheet. They've gone online. They've done the research. There is so much information, and not just the breadth, but things are changing all the time. And so there's new laws and there's new tax code, and some of them might have a positive impact or a negative impact, right? So I think the first sort of thought to consider is, how complex is your situation? What value are you looking for when you come to talk to a financial advisor?
That's so great. And people who are selling their businesses, I have a friend who's going through that right now. We've talked a lot through this process. In the midst of that, this is his first time selling a business. And so there's things, my background as an M&A attorney, I've done this a number of times. And so very old hat, oh, you're going to see this, then you're going to see this, then you're going to see this. And they were really useful, just, what's coming down the road. I like your comment, Laura, with complexity of, we used to do our own taxes. I did them some years, you did them some years. But as our life changed, we started getting 1099 returns in the midst of W-2s. We also started getting some K-1s, which are, if you own a company or a business, and the complexity just kept building. And there became a moment where we said, even though we're in the financial space and we do a lot of long-term tax planning, the actual tax preparation, we said, we need an expert in here. We need someone who can do this, one, to take it off our plates, but two, to do a much better job than we could, because this is what they do. This is their lane.
Right.
And
So we
so we
hired a
brought
who.
we
There's
heard
a
a who,
famous
right?
book out there by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy, and it's called Who, Not How. And that's where that concept comes from. But a lot of times we use that expression, and especially as we're meeting new clients that come in, they may share all their financial information. It may be evident to us that we could add value and that there's complexity within their plan. But ultimately, it comes down to whether or not that person is ready to hire a who. And from your example, it wasn't that you and me couldn't sit down and probably take pen to paper and figure out our taxes, so to speak, and do it ourselves. But we were ready to hire a who because, number one, they do it every day. And so they're going to be better at it than we are and more efficient at it. And three, that's not really our highest and best use of our time. So sometimes in that initial conversation that we have with clients, and specifically business owners, I'm going to say, and retirees, where they've finished their career and they have a new sort of calling on their time, so to speak. I don't have to be at a job every day, but maybe I now can go do that thing that I always wanted to do: travel, philanthropy, farm, lots of different scenarios. But is managing your finances your highest and best, or can you receive value from having somebody who does it every day and can do it efficiently and do it better probably than you can?
Yeah, that's so good. I think that dovetails really nicely into this next one. The first one being life got more complex. The second, I think if you have a big vision, it could be that you're facing a large financial decision, you have retirement looming, or just you have a vision of where you want to get to. There's this idea of who do you have behind you? Who do you have on your team? It's going to get you there. One of my favorite quotes, I've used this a while, but it says, if more information was the answer, then we'd all be billionaires with perfect abs. It's by a guy named Derek Sivers. It's a great quote in the sense that if it was just figure out how to do it, I just need more information. I just need a bigger spreadsheet. I just need a little more information. Then all us researchers in the age of the internet have figured it out
Mhm.
already. Things like abs or being a billion, like it takes work. It takes more than just that. And people who have a big vision, whatever their age they are, or they're facing a big a decision, a financial decision, like if they've got a goal of where they want to get to, and it's not just a tiny step further, but it's a big goal. Well, then you need some people in your corner to get some of those things off your plate, so you can focus
Mhm.
on the things that make, in essence, your superpower. If you're good
Um,
at sales, if you're good at growing, do that, right? Let other
right.
people support what you need.
And let's talk about some of those major decisions. One is, when can I retire? Two, we have someone that we're working with recently that's not sure of their life expectancy. And so they want to make sure they have a plan in place for their spouse. They're trying to figure out how to estimate what their healthcare delivery costs will be. It's premature. They didn't expect to be in this situation as young as they are in their early 60s, right? Just recently, I think twice this week, I've had clients that have sent me kind of real estate investment opportunities and like, hey, can you take a look? Like, I think this is great. It all makes sense on paper, but is this something that I should do? And we have to fit not just that one investment opportunity, but just as a solo decision, right? We get a chance to kind of look at it in the whole, in the entirety, and say, like, okay, does this make sense overall when we're looking at your investment portfolio? We have others actually where it could be a couple and one spouse is really interested in a new investment opportunity. It might be in a private company or private equity, and the spouse is kind of dragging their feet. Maybe they're not as convinced. And so a lot of times we're having conversations about pros and cons. And really, I think what's important to note too is your financial advisor isn't the one making the actual decision for you. You go to a physician, they give you recommendations to live your best healthy lifestyle, right? Or to combat whatever issue it is that you have. But you still have to be the one to take the medicine or do get in your daily steps, do the exercise, eat healthy, right? We're going to give our clients all the information, but it's their life to lead. We just want to help them get to where they want to go as successfully as possible.
I love that analogy of just that aspect. Like they're the superheroes here, right? They're considering these things, they're leaning into them, but just equipping them with the right information so they can make the best choice of what they want to do. And even between the couples, I think there's that the math that we do. There's also the interpersonal dynamic of how do we get on the same team, get on board with the same choices, especially when it matters, right? We've had a number of folks talk about a job change. I'm thinking about shifting careers, and what's that going to mean for my household? Like it's a big deal. And to have someone kind of walk you through that, so such a big benefit. So the next one, I would say that you're ready for an advisor is when you've got through that growth phase, right? You've been building, you've been growing, you've been accumulating, and now often, and we've said this in prior podcasts, often the concentration of effort and assets is what helps build that growth. You concentrate on your career, you concentrate on some either good stocks or good apartment buildings or whatever you get into. But there comes a moment where you made it. You have good assets. You've built this great thing. Now you need to diversify. And that might mean stepping into things that you're not as comfortable with. And we have some people who are comfortable with the stocks around them. In fact, one client came in and they owned some Harley Davidson stock. They owned some Coca-Cola stock. They owned some Boeing stock. There were things that they had seen, thought about, researched, but there's that was just 3 stocks, and that's not enough. And for them now to start diversifying into things that they've companies they've never heard of, and dividend paying stocks that they didn't know were needed in their portfolio, they were at a point now where they need to diversify, not just within stocks but also across asset classes. And for us, we were able to bring in this perspective of talking about things that they just weren't as comfortable with, they weren't as used to, and if it was up to them, they would have stayed in one asset. I see this a lot in real estate. We have a lot of clients who come in, they have some great real estate and they've built over the years, and they're just very comfortable with it. But now is a
Mm-hmm.
season where they're needing to diversify. They'll still hold some real estate. They need to diversify out of that a bit. And they're less comfortable there. It's not a tangible asset they can see or they can drive by. Or so I think when people get to a point where they have a longer term vision and they're ready to start diversifying what they hold, it's a really good
Right.
moment to bring in somebody else.
Right. You hear investment managers talk about diversification all the time, and mostly what they're talking about is the asset allocation within your investment account. But when you're talking about a holistic financial plan, we're talking about diversification across the board. What types of things are you invested in? How liquid versus illiquid are those assets? What's the cash flow needs of the household? Furthermore, how are we going to protect those assets in case of, right, a catastrophic event? And what's going to happen when you pass away? Right? What's going to happen when you retire and you don't have that just paycheck coming into the household? How are we going to structure that income in the most tax efficient way? Right? There are so many different elements to the financial plan. Not any singular slice of the pie, so to speak, is brain science, but when you put it all together, it is complex, right? And to have somebody who's just kind of asking the questions to making sure the whole plan checks out and that you really have answered all those questions that you need to make your finances work for you. I do want to take a pause real quick and say, because I've been using that term financial advisor, and it is true that our industry is wrought with certifications and qualifications, and many people can call themselves a financial advisor. Jeremiah and I are both certified financial planners. Jeremiah is also a California licensed attorney. Jeremiah, do you want to just share a little bit about the difference between the CFP, Certified Financial Planner designation, and others that people find in the industry?
Yeah, there's the hard part that I see is people call themselves a financial advisor, and their primary role may be in sales, and we see that a lot. That they either work for an annuity type company, insurance type company, and they would say we're planning, we're doing these things. But as you drill down to it, and the hard part is how's a person who's not familiar with this industry to know the differences?
Right.
The biggest question I always ask is how do you get paid? How if I'm going to work with you, how are you going to get paid? And I think it's an extremely fair question. And if they say, well, it's a commission based on what I sell you, or it's a commission based on what products you invest in, it's not bad. I mean, that's a way that people work, but you should know that. You should know in the back of your head, hey, they're going to lead me into something that when I say yes to it, they get a commission, they get paid. And the certified financial planner has a huge emphasis on the planning piece well before there's any sort of investments or transfers of money or products or financial instruments. It's planning what makes sense for you. And the fiduciary role, my background being an attorney, I'm used to coming alongside a client and carrying only what's best for that client, whether the deal goes through or whether we torpedo it. And that's a separate question. I want to care about what's good for that client. And a certified financial planner is the same type of role. It's to say we're coming alongside our client and helping them guide through what's coming before them. What's the best plans for their life? What's the best next steps? And for us, someone should ask us, how do we get paid? And we don't make commissions. We don't take kickbacks. We have a fee for services, but it's understanding that I think is a big deal. There's exit planners, there's retirement income specialists, there's a number of different certifications out there, and people who have those would say these are great. I think the certified financial planner is worth the large amount of effort that goes into passing that. 'Cause I think it's a great gold standard. If I see someone else as a CFP, I know they have it's a comprehensive exam. So I know they have a certain level of competency in all these different areas that are going to go into someone's financial plan. And so
Right.
it's a good confirmation that they know what they're talking about in a lot of different areas, and they can provide some really holistic advice. So
Right.
yeah, it's alphabet soup out there, but I think it's CFP and fiduciary and how they get paid. Those are great questions to be asking.
Right. Critical, critical. So, well, the next thing that we want to talk about, and we've kind of touched on it before, is that, there's some people that maybe enjoy investment work. Maybe their investments have performed fairly well, but they've gotten to a point in their life where they just don't want to do it anymore. And we see this oftentimes when people are moving into retirement or very busy business owners. Even some people, we have some clients who have their MBAs in finance, right? Or a master's in economics, right? And they come to us to manage their investments, not because they don't know how to, but because they realize, again, kind of going back to what's their highest and best, where is their time being called out? They want to make sure that somebody's monitoring it on a consistent basis. So, if that's you, our listener, where you say, yeah, I know enough about investments, they've performed pretty well over time. There may come a point in your future where you just say, I'm just not the best person to do this anymore for whatever reason. And that would be a good moment to come
Yeah.
and speak with a financial advisor.
On that same note, there's times where people just feel lonely in their
Mm-hmm.
finances. Some spouses and married couples, they are very collaborative. They're talking through these items. They're discussing them. They're on the same page. They're united. That happens. There's other times where people are single, or their spouse is just not that interested. And so they kind of feel like they're in a vacuum. So they know their friend is doing that, their other friend is doing that. They heard this on the news, but as they look at their own finances, they feel really alone. And I find a lot of folks, as they start working with us, that feeling of isolation and uncertainty and aloneness, all just goes away. To say, hey, I know I'm on the right track. I have confirmation. I know this is a good choice for my and my family's future. And they're able to step forward with that. I guess the confidence is different, that they know what's happening, and they know if tomorrow when something changes, we're going to be there for that too. So I think that's the getting away from that loneliness, and that uncertainty. Like I said, it's often people who have this master spreadsheet. They built it, they spent time in it, they're relying on it, but man, they're not ready to pull the trigger on the investment or retiring because they're not sure that this is really right. And we walk through it with them, and bring in some of the software, some of the resources, some of the knowledge that we have, and can really allow them to take that same initial analysis and turn it into like robust confidence that they can walk
Mm-hmm.
forward on. So I think not being alone is a huge piece.
Yeah, and that tees up kind of the last point that we were going to make. And I'm really excited to talk about this topic because the history of our industry, those who are giving financial advice or financial services, the history of our industry was very transactional based, right? When you had to go to your financial advisor's office and they had to make a trade on your behalf via paper, there was a transaction fee for each one of those trade, right? You were talking to someone who oversaw just your investments. And flash forward, now the role of a financial planner is much more holistic. And in our industry, I think I've said before on some of our recordings, if somebody were to come in and just say, hey, here's $500,000, can you just invest it for me? The answer is no. Because I don't know how to invest it. I need to know you. I need to know what your goals are. I need to know what your risk tolerance is. I need to know, I could invest it how I might want to invest my money, but what's the purpose of those funds? And so, the change in our industry has come about in that you don't just show up like to your bank. That is a transactional relationship. You're coming to get cash or to take a loan or set up a new account, right? That is a transactional relationship. You don't expect necessarily to come back and see the same person next time you walk into a bank. Our firm here, right? We say we know our clients by name, kind of the cheers where everybody knows your name. But not just that, we know what's important to them. We know what season of life they're in. We know when the markets go up and down that there's certain people that are going to be more worried about that because of where they are in life, planning to retire in the next 2 months, right? So the relationship that we hold with our clients is, I want to just keep using that word holistic, but it really does touch on a myriad of different facets and aspect of their life. And that's a sacred space. It's a personal space for sure.
Yeah. And I think that with that is the relationship, not just with the one spouse, it's with both. And we've had a number of clients who, they as a spouse that really ran the finances, felt confident that they could continue doing this. They were happy with how they were doing it, but they knew if anything happened to them, their spouse would be lost. They don't know where the passwords are, and even if they had all that technical detail, like how the accounts are structured, why they're in certain investments, it just wasn't that spouse's desire to know those things. And so we've worked with a number of clients who they came in and built that relationship over time, knowing, hey, in the coming years, the spouse who runs the finances may not be here, and there's risk that they might not be here. And they want to make sure that their other spouse is provided for, is cared for, has a team, is supported. And we have, just by, I guess, demographics, we have I would say a large amount of widows that we support that happen to be the spouses that didn't care as much about the finances initially. Their spouses have passed away. So now we have these surviving spouses that we work with and we care for. They have a team. They're not vulnerable because they have us. Otherwise, they would be extremely vulnerable. And so I think there's that element too. Like when you're looking for a relationship, you don't want your spouse, right, the one who doesn't do the finances, to have to, good luck, go find somebody. Rather, but to get that set up, established, get that trust built, so that as they walk through life, you know that they're going to be well supported. I think that's part of being responsible in the spouse who cares for the finances, to not just have your super spreadsheet, but really make sure your spouse is able to step into that. And it might be that's not just showing them where the spreadsheet is. It might be having a team around them that will care for them, that will provide for them, that will take what you've built together and make sure it lasts the rest of their life.
Yeah, a story recently we had was a client whose father passed away, and she's a successor trustee. So she's stepping into her role as trustee, and she's trying to oversee the estate and finalize the final taxes and the settling of the estate, all these sorts of questions, right? And before her dad had passed away, he had always said to her, if anything happens to me, call my attorney. So the person that had written his estate plan. And guess what? He hadn't been in touch with this attorney for several years, because you write an estate plan and then it's not something that people frequently update, right? It's not like you're in touch with your attorney always on an annual basis. And so she picked up the phone to contact this attorney, but it had been years since her dad had been in touch, and no one's getting back to her. No one. And she's just wondering what to do next, right? She just needs like a simple roadmap of like, okay, what, I want to make sure I do my part here. I'm willing, but I have no instruction and no guidance. And, and to flip that with, how many clients where, the day after a loved one passes away, we're in the top 5, of who gets a call. And it's not necessarily that anything urgent has to happen, but they just notify us. And then we come alongside them and say, okay, what are the next steps here? Right? Don't get 1 copy of the death certificate, get 10. And here's why. Here are the types of assets that they hold. This is how they're going to transition, right? So I think that having someone who can walk with you through all those seasons and ultimately be willing to pick up the phone when you call and when you're needed, because you have a consistent relationship. So I veer a little bit, but I think that's a really important part of the job that we get to do every day for our clients.
Yep. So valuable. So if this has been useful, hopefully it has been to anyone out there thinking about, do I need a financial advisor? Am I ready for that? There's a few things we talked about 5 of them, of saying these might be signs you're ready. If you or someone in your life, you say, hey, this would be valuable to them, let us know, reach out. We're always happy to have discussions to explore if this would be useful for you.
Yep. TrichordAdvisors.com. Thanks for listening today. Bye. We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about, or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit TrichordAdvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@TrichordAdvisors.com, or simply click on the link in the show notes.
This show was produced by Graham Gardner at Model FA. Find out more about how to create a podcast for your financial planning business by visiting modelfa.com. We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Trichord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.